Hello, folks, and welcome to part two of looking at either tornado outbreaks with only one F5 or F5s that are not associated with any outbreak or event in particular, as again, those kind of things can happen, although standalone tornadoes from just a single thunderstorm, the likelihoods of that are pretty rare, but I digress. Again, part two. We are jumping right in, folks, to the Valley Mills, Texas F5. This one occurred on May 6th, 1973. This tornado coursed just 17 kilometers and reached just 91 meters wide. That is 100 yards wide. And thankfully, I could not find any casualties that this tornado caused. Casualties meaning no deaths and no injuries. Note that this tornado only produced structural damage reaching only F2 strength. However, this is a video on F5s. Hey, wait a minute. Well, you see here, wind engineers testified that a pickup truck, which if you look up the weight of a 1973 Chevy C10, is around 4,000 pounds. That's around 1,800 kilos, somewhere around there. Which, don't get me wrong, lifting a 4,000 pound truck half a mile and another one around 200 meters is still very impressive. But at the same time, it's like, is that really all that's needed for the F5 rating? Some barns were also leveled outside of Valley Mills, which, if you know anything about wooden structures, which happen to be barns especially, are not exactly built to withstand even F1 damage, so there's that as well. For this reason, specifically the pickup truck being thrown half a mile, the Dr. Ted Fujita actually did allow the F5 rating on this tornado, which in my opinion makes this rating extremely debatable, as again, lifting to, let's say that they were Chevy C10s that weighed exactly 4,000 pounds, again around 1,800 kilos. Don't get me wrong, lifting that is pretty impressive, but we've seen F5s do much worse. And again, I don't think that lifting a pickup half a mile is the only requirements for an F5. But I'm not a wind engineer, I'm not a structural engineer. Those guys were, and they said it was F5, so who am I to judge? I will still judge. But officially, that tornado is an F5, so we are moving on. That tornado does upset me a little bit, but again, I'm not going to say anything further about it. We are moving on to another Texan tornado that happened on April 19th of 1976. This tornado affected the community of Brownwood, Texas. Kind of an obvious name, most wood is brown. This tornado would have a track of around 16 kilometers, that's around 10 miles, and only injured 11 people. According to Dr. Grisoulis, I believe it was, 4 houses, as well as their additions, so likely just like, I don't know, like patios or garages attached to them, were completely leveled. And very surprisingly, several teens were thrown 1,000 yards, that's around 800 meters, but thankfully survived with relatively minor injuries. This tornado would strike the Brownwood Regional Airport, where it did destroy some hangars and a few planes. A very uh, potent tornado here that is not exactly talked about all that much happened in Jordan, Iowa on June 13th, 1976. This tornado had a path of 41 kilometers long and reached around 1.6 kilometers wide. That's a mile wide. This tornado would thankfully cause 0 casualties, but also cause $20 million in damage. Thankfully, Dr. Ted Fujita did research this tornado, and we can see that with this very detailed track here in the right hand corner, as well as down here from the NWS in the bottom right. Note that homes were completely gone, evidently without a trace. Some very, very well built farms were completely gone as well. It is estimated that this tornado reached 200 miles per hour at least multiple times throughout its path, and according to Dr. Fujita himself, this was, you can see that, this was one of the most intense tornadoes that he had ever seen, like that with Xenia and Gerald, which happened in 1974 and 1997 respectively. Thankfully, we were also able to get some pictures of this tornado, and even it was caught on WSR 57. So, a very, very well researched, albeit relatively unknown tornado here. Our next tornado occurred on April 4th, 1977. This one occurred in Birmingham, Alabama. This tornado is also known as the Smithfield Tornado, Smithfield F5, I should say, or the Tarrant F5. This tornado tracked 23.5 kilometers and reached up to 3/4 of a mile wide, although it was usually a little bit less than that. This tornado would cause 22 deaths, more than 125 injuries, and $25 million in damage. This tornado was one of 21 from a tornado outbreak, this one being the only violent, thank goodness. And note that we have a lot of damage photos here that appear to be from the same area, and that's for a good reason. Smithfield Drive and Smithfield Lane were the absolute worst hit communities. This is why the tornado is sometimes called the Smithfield F5, as it was these drives and lanes that suffered the most, I'll say. Note that also from this tornado, as we can see back here in this colored photo, trees were completely debarked, and 2 dump trucks, presumably weighing more than 4,000 pounds, like a Chevy C10, were absolutely tossed. Note that this tornado also caused extensive damage to Daniel Payne College, so much so that the college actually had to shut down eventually. Jumping forward, way forward to 1996. On July 18th, 1996, Oakfield, Wisconsin would receive the impacts of an F5. This tornado is estimated to have winds of 265 miles per hour, which is borderline F5 strength. This tornado would cause, this tornado had track. I'm skipping forward. I'm going too fast for myself. This tornado had a track just over 21 kilometers long and reached in at around 370 meters wide. Thankfully, this tornado did not cause any deaths, but did injure anywhere from 12 to 17 people. It also caused at least $40 million in damage. Many cars, as well as homes, were affected from this tornado. Many cars were tossed anywhere from just a few feet all the way to 122 meters. That is around 300-ish or so feet. 327 homes would be affected in total, with 47 of them being destroyed. Hell, we can see in this bottom middle photo here some bent anchor bolts, and there were even some bent rebar supports. Rebar supports and anchor bolts are obviously not supposed to bend. They're kind of called anchor bolts for a reason. You know, to make sure that the home doesn't go anywhere, but then the home went somewhere, and you're like, oh no, what happened? And it's like, oh, that's not a good thing. It was not a good thing. Some of these rebar supports were bent to angles of 60 to 90 degrees, which is absolutely insane. This tornado would also destroy the Friday Canning Company plant, which scattered, I'm not kidding, millions of empty cans everywhere. Which is, to be honest, that does sound just the tiniest bit funny, but like, that's a lot of cleanup. Note that this tornado was originally rated anywhere from F3 to F4, but as more evidence was found as the damage survey went on. This tornado was rated F5. This tornado, happening in 1996, had an 8-minute lead time with the sirens, so the sirens were sounded 8 minutes before this tornado hit. This most likely caused the death toll to become 0 and for the very low injury number, which I think I speak for everyone when I say good. Thankfully, nobody died and that not very many people were injured. Birmingham, Alabama would see an F5 again on April 8th, 1998. This tornado pathed 84.5 kilometers and reached around 3/4 of a mile wide, remaining consistent for most of its life. That is 1.2 kilometers wide, if I'm not mistaken, in non-freedom units. This tornado would cause 32 deaths as well as 259 injuries, plus $201 million in damage. Million! Like how Dr. Evil says it, I'm sorry. Note that the community of Oak Grove was extremely heavily hit. In fact, we have a little radar signature. This is the velocity data down here at the bottom middle, with the tornado signature being shown in this pale yellow circle. The community of Oak Grove is shown there highlighted. And we can see here to the right of that velocity data, the high school in Oak Grove that was extremely heavily damaged. There would also be F5 damage in the Concord area as well, which is closer to Tuscaloosa. That is further up here on the tornado's path. That is what number, like, what, I don't know why the parentheses 14 is there, but that is where Concord is at. There was a live TV camera that witnessed the power outage that happened in western Birmingham as this tornado was going on. And Alfaria has a video on this tornado that goes in much further depth than I can here, as I generally like to just keep things a little bit shorter here. Alfaria has a more than 20-minute video on this tornado, so I highly recommend to you that if you want to know more on this tornado, that you go check him out. Check that video out, please. Note that one was the end of our part 2 here, but we're not done yet. We're going to go over the significances of them all. Note that we are seeing our new warning system work incredibly well. In fact, it's so good that it is still being used to this day. 1970 onwards, the Weather Bureau was renamed to the NWS, and we also see technology massively improve. We see the WSR 57 give way to the WSR 74, which I did forget to mention in a weather topic video of mine, which I do apologize for that. I was more concerned over the WSR 88 and forgot that the 74, I knew the 74 existed, but I forgot to mention it again, I'm sorry. And then we see the WSR 74, my goodness, give way to the WSR 88. In fact, the WSR 88 is still in service to this day. It is called NexRad and officially is the WSR 88D. We also see after around 1965 with the Palm Sunday tornado outbreak, and moving forward, definitely a much larger emphasis on civilian contribution. So we're talking about weather reports and the like. So now anyone can become an adult, I should say, can become a NWS trained and certified weather spotter. I don't care where you live in the US, that is a very important thing. Being a weather spotter, it's not like a full-time thing. You don't need to go around driving across your whole entire state and reporting everything you see. You can just do it from your porch. You can just say, there's I'm getting 3-inch hail here in I don't know, Town, Illinois. I'm getting 3-inch size hail on the northern side of Cuba, Illinois, that sort of thing. And then that's a useful report. Bam, there you go. That's a civilian contribution, rather than just them guessing just the size of the hail based on radar data. So that, folks, is all that I have for our standalone F5s and such from after 1970, I'll say, actually, where the introduction of the Fujita scale has actually been a thing and is adopted. Unfortunately, I do not have any standalone EF5s, as I have already actually talked about them, and I'm sure that you all noticed the big gap from the 70s to the 90s. That's because I have already done videos on those F5s specifically from outbreaks, or even not from outbreaks before. So that's the reason for that gap. In any case, though, that is all that I have for you folks. I hope that you'll learn something from this video. Again, go check out Off Area's video on the on the 90s Birmingham F5. Please do so. It's really good. Watch it. Again, I'll see you in the next one, and I thank you all so much for watching.